And similarly, the Gospels are credible testimonies passed down by those who encountered Jesus and those who meticulously interviewed eyewitnesses. And John reminds us in John 20:30, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. You see, even John affirms to us that there's far more to the story, yet what's recorded is sufficient to ground our faith in reality. And when we trust the historical Jesus, we realize we're not embracing a myth, but walking into a relationship with the living God. So our next point will dive deeper into why this historical foundation is so critical.
Antiquity studies, classics, biblical studies, textual criticism, or any other related field aren't. The reason for this is that if we were to cast doubt on the historical Jesus, then based on the primary records we have, we would have to cast doubt even more on the existence of any other figure from the ancient world. For example, Jesus actually stacks up pretty well against some of the best attested characters from ancient antiquity. The most powerful individual during the life of Jesus was the Emperor Tiberius. We know about the details of his life from 4 biographers. Jesus, likewise, has 4 biographers. All of the sources for Tiberius came 80 or more years after the events they narrate. Even with the most skeptical dating, we're still only waiting for the first gospel biography of Jesus to be written, coming in at around 30 years after his death. And there's good historical evidence to push that even back to 20 years. And while Mark and Luke were not...
So imagine 20 years. And Tiberius was the emperor of Rome. This guy had immense power, yet Jesus had more documented about him than one of the most powerful figures in the world at the time, if not the most powerful figure in the world. So the guest on Joe Rogan actually got it wrong. She's guessing a century after, when actually we can date it back to about 20 years after. And for people questioning, weren't they written too late, or did they even know Jesus? This doubt can lead to a slippery slope where we suspect that everything in Scripture might be mere invention. You question one thing, you question everything. It was Calvin that wrote, we owe to the Scripture the same reverence which we owe to God, because it has proceeded from him alone and has nothing of man mixed with it. And this doesn't mean that we're ignorant or we ignore historical processes. Rather, we see that God used the human authors in the way that safeguards truth. You all have a family with a secret recipe, right? Grandmothers or great granny nannies, a secret apple pie or beef stew. Let's say she shares it only after a few decades. Are you going to doubt the authenticity of her recipe just because it wasn't written down the day she first baked it? Of course not.